Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bituation Room. Hopefully, all of my tech is working. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for pressing play. Thank you for hanging out and waiting if you're watching live. If you're not listening live or watching live, know that there are people who do. Sometimes I'm a disappointment because I'm late. But I have a really good excuse. Well, I'm not really, but I will say that I am going to be going into the TYT studio in a little bit. So that's why I had to get my ducks in a row. I'm going to be there on the second hour. It should be pretty fun. Maz Jabrani, comedian who I got to get on this show. He's going to be on there. But anyway, enough about TYT. Let's talk about you and me. This is the Bituation Room. This is the bonus Friday episode, the Fantastic Friday episode, not a bonus. Bonus episodes happen on Wednesday for all the patrons and members on YouTube and Twitch. So thank you guys so much once again for your kind support. What did we talk about on Wednesday? It was like kind of heavy stuff. Now every time I do the show, I immediately blank on what the hell we just talked about because there's so much news. But I have to plug it. Oh yes. Wait, hang on. Anyway, well, someone remind me in the chat so I can actually plug this properly. Speaking of plugging properly, I hope those who are in the Chicago area got tickets or are getting tickets to the Bituation Room Live, which is also a mashup of Bad Hasbara, Matt Lieb's podcast, and my podcast, Monday, August 19th, in honor of the DNC and everyone who's going to be tear gas for protesting genocide. And then Tuesday, we're doing live stand-up comedy. And so that's going to be super fun. It's just going to be the two of us. Probably have a local opener. It'll be very good. So get your tickets there. You can go to thelincolnlodge.com/calendar. You can also go to my website, francescafiorentini.com. And you can get your tickets. And I hope to see you at one or both shows. I made sure to price it at a point that isn't crazy. So it's $20. Felt like that was fair. My God, hotels are not cheap. I'm still looking into figuring out where the F I'm going to stay. And minimize all the costs and everything. Plus I got to pay my mom to babysit. I don't really, but I actually have to pay someone else to babysit with her because, she's an older lady. She's not able to do it all by herself. But anyway, you didn't come here to hear about my personal life. You came to hear about some goddamn news. There's so much going on once everything gets fixed. But my favorite piece of news, maybe for the week, I mean, look, last Thursday, Trump became a felon. This Thursday, Steve Bannon has to, we now know, report to jail. So go directly to jail, straight to jail, as Fred Armisen's character would say. So it's just so good. Now, here's the thing. There's only two people in the Trump sphere that have been sentenced over not complying with Congress's request that they testify about January 6th, right? What happened. Those are Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon, i.e. likely the most guilty MFers out there. And they were obviously, unclear, how official Navarro wasn't in the cabinet, nor was Bannon, but they were advisors, close advisors on the campaign and whatnot. So Steve Bannon is defying it. He's not a sellout. He's going to just take me away. Please make sure Steve Bannon has access to whatever skincare routine he doesn't do every day, just so he doesn't slowly turn into a pockmark, just so he just doesn't turn into the smoker's lung that he is. He truly is if you're a kid of the 80s, this is your lungs when you smoke for whatever it is, 10 years, right? That's the image that they use to scare you into never lighting a cigarette in your life. And honestly, if you just showed Steve Bannon's face, it works. Steve Bannon looks like a Ren and Stimpy cartoon, you know, but like real life. Like, damn, there's a lot of detail going on in your face right now, my guy. Steve Bannon looks like, and this is all, it looks like what if Nazism, you know, also was reflected in how attractive you are. And that is exactly what he is, just like the ugliest Nazi you've ever seen. That doesn't matter, right? Obviously, you know, I don't deserve to throw the uglies under the bus because Steve Bannon doesn't represent those folks. But let's talk about him. A federal judge on Thursday ordered former advisor Steve Bannon to report to prison on July 1st to begin a 4-month prison sentence for defying subpoenas from the Jan 6 committee. Bannon was sentenced a year and a half ago in October to 4 months behind bars, the same sentence currently being served by former Trump advisor Peter Navarro, who also refused to comply with the Jan 6 subpoena. They were trying to like appeal it and whatnot. His lawyers have argued that sentencing should be stayed until they appeal it to the full appeals court and the Supreme Court. Sure. I mean, look, I would normally say that the Supreme Court ain't going to take up this dude defying a congressional subpoena, but you never know. This Supreme Court will take up anything. I mean, for all we know, Alito's little quibble with his neighbors, they're basically going to escalate that to the Supreme Court, and Alito will not recuse himself. They'll just be like, no, they're what do you mean conflict of interest? All right. They're nosy Nellies telling me I can't fly an upside down flag after Jan 6. Any delay, of course, would benefit Bannon if Trump is elected president and in November and decides, just as he did on the last day of his presidency on January 20th, 2021, to pardon Bannon on federal criminal charges. Remember, Trump can't actually pardon himself in a lot of the cases he's facing, but we're going to talk about some of those cases because it's just an interesting little conundrum we've got going on. You know, it's like for those who felt like, you know, this hush money payment, this is not the big one. This is ticky-tack and yada, yada, yada. I mean, in some ways, right? Like, doesn't every crime boss get taken down by some ticky-tack financial crimes? Like, the big thing, like ordering the hit out on this person or whatnot, like, that never actually gets litigated. The big stuff doesn't get litigated. And it seems like with Trump, that's exactly what's going to happen, that all of these cases, especially the federal cases, are going to get punted until after the election. But we'll get to that in a second. I just love the idea of Bannon in prison. Let's see. Nichols sentenced. Oh, okay. So so this is his judge who also sentenced someone, a guy who got entrapped by a Bumble scheme, which is very good. This is not the first time a Jan 6er got caught by being on like Bumble or fucking what's the other one, Tinder or some shit. But I wanted to read this because I think that we'll get a sense of how his prison time is going to go by looking at how Peter Navarro is doing and what it's going to be like. Peter Navarro is, I think, one of the funnier Trump characters. I mean, he's been outside of courtrooms before trying to appeal this while a woman stands behind him and trolls him live to his face, holding a sign that says Peter Navarro is a criminal. And he like tries to take her sign all times. These are like the videos I've been meaning to watch with y'all, but haven't in a while. So it's just so funny. He's perhaps one of the saddest Trump characters. And honestly, that's in the same universe as My Pillow guy, as the Talbot's Yeti, Sidney Powell. Like, there's a lot of sad characters, but Peter Navarro very much takes the cake. So he's an ex-White House aide to former President Trump. So I guess he was an official aide. Reported to prison in Miami. This was at the end of May. Oh, no, sorry. March. My bad. March. He was sentenced to 4 months in prison for his refusal to comply with the subpoena from the House Select Committee. Yada, 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 yada. Navarro was subpoenaed for documents and testimony related to the efforts to overturn the 2020 election, culminating in a ransacking the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Navarro rebuffed the demands, claiming that Trump had asserted privilege over the request and arguing that the House Committee must negotiate with Trump directly to sort out that dispute. He was charged in June 2022 with 2 counts of contempt of Congress and was found guilty on both counts last September. What his incarceration could look like, who knows how it's going. When I picked him up this morning, he was ready to go. Sam Mangle, the prison consultant Navarro hired to prepare for his incarceration, told CNN's Caitlin Collins on The Source. I love that you can have a prison consultant. Like, do you think that most people who are going to prison for some low-level theft or possession of marijuana or small amount of illicit substances, do you think they get a prison consultant? This is a little the life coach of your incarceration. I love that. Okay, so Peter, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a vision board for the next 4 months. And I want you to make sure that you put it and hang it in your cell if you're allowed. And I want you to look at it every single day. Now, mostly it's going to be Donald Trump's head on the body of someone from the cover of Men's Health. But other than that, it's going to be about freedom. It's going to be lots of birds, It's going to be just nothing but positive thoughts, just good vibes, crystals. Here's this rose quartz, take it. And he's like, so when I hang it, do I slowly chisel the wall behind where it's hanging, like in Shawshank? I don't know if you're strong enough or have enough dedication to do that for 4 months. And I don't even know if 4 months is long enough for you to do that and do a whole break situation. But look, why don't we put it on the board and we can see how that goes. I could say so many inappropriate things about sort of exercises he might, want to do for certain body parts. Maybe there's a little, maybe there's butt plugs. Look, it's Pride. There might be butt plugs in Peter Navarro's prison consultant, where he's like, so here's what you do. What I'm going to put on your vision board is, just a dog who happens to be a female dog, because you're going to want to be somebody's bitch very, very quickly. You're going to pick, because you ideally only want to be one person's bitch. You don't want 2 people to fight over you. So I would like you to be just the strongest man. They should be white, because in prison, your kind rule, and, skinheads are a thing. And so pick the biggest white man and just give him just some flirty eyes initially, and he will protect you for the entire 4 months. Okay, so his prison consultant said, I think this morning he presented himself very well, very strong, he said. But naturally, anyone going to federal prison is going to be nervous. You lose all control. I don't care who you are. I don't care what your profile is. When you're in there, you're a number. Mangle also said that since he's spoken with some of his other clients in the facility who have said Navarro is quite doing fine today, Navarro is expected to spend 90 days behind bars, given federal laws that allow for early release of certain inmates. He was hoping to be assigned to an air-conditioned dormitory reserved for elderly male inmates. Sure. All the Trump stooges are hoping for that. But also, can you imagine, speaking of Bannon, imagine, you think anybody want to get near Bannon? Nobody wants to make Bannon their bitch. You know what I'm saying? That's just not, gross. That dormitory houses 80 men in bunk beds, he said. There will be no privacy in the dorm. People, I need us to fully understand how fucking funny it is that not one, but 2 Trump aides are going to be sleeping in bunk beds in federal prison. Yeah, Trump's a convicted felon, and all of his aides, whether it's Paul Manafort, whether it's Michael Flynn. I mean, Paul Manafort actually served time. Whether it's Michael Cohen, Michael Flynn didn't serve time. I don't think he, I know he lied. Manafort was serving time because he lied to federal prosecutors. But like, these are also people that should Trump be reelected, they're going to go right back into the White House. You think they're going to like, they will lift all kinds of security clearance, barometers or whatever to allow these people back into the fucking Oval. Like, that's exactly what will happen. I love that, like, this is the way maybe we get prison reform. Like, if you get Steve Bannon to actually see what prison is like, this is like some sort of like reality television doc. You know what I'm saying? This is like The Simple Life, but for Trump officials who actually got their asses thrown in jail. It can be scary and intimidating, but he's going to be perfectly safe, Mangle said. Navarro will have access to TVs that are set up in prison and allow him to follow the news. And he will also be able to use email and make phone calls. So he's going to be on Twitter. Like, I wonder if they get social media. That's my other question. The prison is one of the older ones in the country, and it sits next to, get this, guys, the city zoo. That's just fun. That's fun. I mean, he could just catch a whiff. Maybe they're downwind. I hope that Peter Navarro's cell is downwind from like the rhino cage or something. Just a lot of some of the runoffs. No, zoos are scary. I hope all those animals are being taken care of, except for Peter Navarro. I mean, look, this is not, again, it's so funny to like relish in someone being incarcerated, but my God, if there was ever a time, and there's no way that they're going to sentence Donald Trump. I fucking wish that he could see the inside of a prison. I wish he could. He's not going to see, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So for everyone who's like freaking out, they can't wait. Oh, they want Trump, like meaning not liberals. I think all liberals and leftists and progressives are all in agreement. This is not going to happen. But the right can't wait. There is part of me that is curious because I want to see them freak out. I want to see, even if it was like 48 hours, like, I want to see them like pressing their boobie up against the glass while they talk to Trump on the phone, that kind of thing. I'm here for it. That being said, in more important news, I guess, it is really crazy how the rest of the cases are playing out against Donald Trump. Specifically when it comes to Georgia, right? Georgia was where there's a fake elector scheme, just like now we know Wisconsin had a fake elector scheme, I believe. So many states had fake elector schemes. This happens to be one of the RICO charges. Remember, Fani Willis charging like dozens, 19, I believe, Trump, either alternate electors or officials, Giuliani, Chesbro, Mark Meadows, all of these fools in basically RICO charges. And because she slept with one of the lawyers that she hired for the case, which honestly, we've all seen The Wire, it happens. Everything's been thrown into the fray now. And she's, arguably fumbled a really important case. Now, again, I mean, I'm sure they would have had ways to slow walk this through other means, but it's a bad look. And so I was just looking at this because this week, the Georgia Court of Appeals stayed the criminal election interference case against former President Donald Trump until an appellate panel could resolve whether the district attorney in Fulton County, that's Fani Willis, should be disqualified from prosecuting the case based on a conflict of interest. But it's like, she wasn't sleeping with the defense. You know what I'm saying? But it's true that it was unprofessional to have this relationship. But do they all ultimately work on behalf of the state? Yeah. Right. And I mean, when I say like, we've all seen The Wire, some of us haven't, and that's a shame, and you really should. But like the DA in The Wire is sleeping with like the lieutenant, which maybe isn't as much of a, I don't know. They're all kind of in cahoots when they're bringing these cases, right? But anyway, Massive setback. Defense lawyers, again for Donald Trump, argued that Ms. Willis and her entire office should be disqualified, but the presiding judge, Scott McAfee of the Fulton County Superior Court, allowed her to stay on it. The defense successfully convinced the state appellate court to hear a pretrial appeal of Judge McAfee's ruling. In other words, kicking it to this appellate court to see whether McAfee, who says, yes, Fani Willis can stay on the case, if that should be overturned. So, like, again, just gumming up the works like crazy. No trial date has been set in Georgia, nor have trial dates been set in the 2 federal criminal cases against Mr. Trump in Florida and Washington, D.C. Both of those cases have also been slowed down by intense legal skirmishing. I mean, in the case of the Florida, this is the classified documents case, mishandled documents case, the bathroom documents case, the show and tell documents case, the one where he was like, I might give you the codes if you can give me a brand deal in Abu Dhabi. He now has, obviously, we've talked about Judge Eileen Cannon. We haven't really talked about that on the show, but Judge Eileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, Trump lackey, who's basically like, I don't know how to read. I don't know. First, am I a lawyer? What do I do? I'm going to have to learn read, and then I can continue to set a trial date for this case. Me no read. Like, she is basically, either the analysis I've read is Eileen Cannon's either dumb as rocks or she's pretending to be dumb as rocks, which is kind of what you can say about most right-wingers in the modern era. Are they dumb or are they pretending to be dumb? Either way, the impact is the same. Timeout. Holy shit. BH gifted 20 Bituation Room subs memberships. Thank you so much. You angel of God, you. Thank you so much. That is really, really generous. That means 20 people get access to all the bonus episodes, which I highly recommend. They are fun. They can be fun. Some of them are fun. Sometimes they're not. Matt Gates on White Ford Bronco. My cat and I got sick this week. Cat got a scalp abscess and a head swelled up. Oh my God, poor baby. I have the flu and feel like Steve Bannon looks, and he looks as to what happened when gonorrhea catches herpes. I'm sorry. I'm very, very sorry. And you're absolutely right. That is what he looks like. And TMHC member for 7 months. Do you have any guesses for the total amount of voters in November? Basically 173 million in 2016, 155 million in 2020. Will 2024 voters total be more or less? So I discussed this early in the year with John of the Damage Report. And I said, and he disagreed with me, I said it was going to be a low voter turnout. I don't know if it will be, I'm curious about what 2008 numbers were. I know 155 million blew, like that was a record for this country, which is great. And I think we still didn't even get to 60% of the eligible voting population. But remember, that was when there was all kinds of expanded ways to vote, except for getting the day off of work, which we all should get. It's ridiculous. But no, it was, drop off ballots, mail-in ballots, so many different ways that people, more polling stations, so many different ways that people could actually vote, extended hours, all because of the pandemic. And Republicans across the country basically learned their lesson about democracy and are like, oh, this is terrible. We're going to get rid of all of those things. All of those things are anti-democratic. All of those things are part of a Biden conspiracy. So nope. Voting will happen. Voting is going to be like library hours in an underfunded town. It's going to happen from between 1 p.m. and 3:55 p.m. If you're in line by 3:50, you probably should get out because you're not going to make the line. In fact, you probably won't finish the line until we're closing at 4. So you should get in line by 1:30. And if you're not in line by 1:30 to vote, you're not going to make the 3.5-hour line to vote. So you should maybe just stay home. So I predict it'll be around the Trump-Hillary numbers. Maybe just splitting the difference, right? Somewhere in between. So what's interesting about like what is happening in these other cases is that so many right-wingers are saying like, he's really, he's being held accountable in all these ways. They're going after him. It's such a witch hunt. Is this and that. And it's like, it's all political. None of these things are going to be resolved by the election. None of them. This was the only case that was resolved by election time. I mean, and what are we talking, like 4 years in the making, 3 years in the making? This justice system in this country moves very slow, and extra slow if you've got a team of underpaid lawyers who will gum up the works for you. And then in this case, again, Fani Willis did it to herself, right? So again, Wednesday's stay means Judge McAfee can't rule on a motion filed by Mr. Trump that argues he should have immunity from prosecution in Georgia. Mr. Trump's lawyers have made a similar argument, in DC, where he was charged again with conspiring to subvert democracy and stay in power following his loss. The U.S. Supreme Court is expected to issue a ruling on that immunity question in the next few weeks, people. This is like huge. And this is what's interesting about what's going on with the Supreme Court right now, is because we've got new news today that Clarence Thomas is just a fucking NASCAR driver of billionaires. Like, every billionaire has their name tattooed on his ass. The dude has accepted so many gifts and vacations and all kinds of perks simply by the fact that he is a Supreme Court justice who can be bought and sold to rule in their favor, and in their meaning the rich's favor, against working people, against democracy, against civil rights expansion, all of that. And so what's interesting now with Clarence Thomas, and then even with Alito, right, is that their backs are kind of against the wall here. And the biggest question is, they're not going to recuse themselves from ruling on presidential immunity, but shouldn't they fucking be recused? Shouldn't Justice John Roberts take them off of this decision if they themselves are so compromised, not just by money, but right-wingers, if they themselves are flying, Jan 6 flags? How do you think they're going to fucking rule on presidential immunity? It's such a joke. Like, it's amazing that the right, like, everything the right says, every projection, every accusation is a confession. Every accusation is a confession. The justice system is rigged against Donald Trump in this country. My guys, you own all of the Supreme Court justices except for like 2. Like, they're so on your side. They have been gunning for you. I mean, do we need to bring up Ginny Thomas's text messages? So it is interesting. I think first of all, Roberts will keep him on. And I think Clarence Thomas and Alito don't give a shit about anything. They were put on the bench to do the bidding of the wealthy and the far right. That is it. That's why they are there. And they will absolutely continue. I mean, to say nothing of Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, do you like beer? Do you like beer? Angel Torres, thank you so much for that super chat. Your read on Bannon killed me. He's like, he looks like he's coughing at all times. Out of context, gifting 10 Bituation Room memberships. You beautiful, beautiful angel. I couldn't think of it. How about a beautiful octopus? I don't know. My octopus best friend. Anyway, the point is that all of this shit is being slow walked. So I hope that psychopaths shut the fuck up for a little bit, because we're not going to see what happens with these cases for a long time. And if the Supreme Court rules presidential immunity, I mean, like, I love also the line like, oh, we're a third world country now. This only happens in third world countries. Sure. Yep. Look at what is happening. They're charging. What happens in third world countries, so to speak, is that the powerful and the rich and the well-connected get off with doing whatever they want to do at the expense of their populations. That's what happens in third world countries. Usually with the collusion of foreign governments. That's what happens in third world countries. Compare that to here. We held Donald Trump accountable for a very small, but still falsifying business records that he then tried to cover up, that could have had an outsized impact on the election. that he did in order to obfuscate and hide from the electorate, which 12 jurors said was incriminating and wrong. And yes, they were unanimous on all 34 counts, as they had to be. But like, now we have a Supreme Court that might be like, oh, when you're president, you can do whatever you want, including subverting democracy, which you are at the helm of and supposed to preside over, but you get to put your thumb on the scale more so than usual, more so than an incumbent would. And you get to basically completely fabricate the fact that you lost the election. You can, I don't know, do whatever you want now. You can ballot stuff. You can send alternate slates of electors. You can make up the idea that the vice president can decide single-handedly whether to overrule the will of the people. You guys, it's not enough that motherfuckers have the electoral college. It's not even that gives them way too much representation in small states that tend to go red. It's not enough that we don't go by the popular vote in the biggest democracy on earth. They still, when they can't win in a system that's already rigged for their victory, they have to cheat, which is amazing to me. It's like, I don't know golf at all, but I can only imagine that you're given like a handicap of, you know, whatever. You're given some handicap is when you're good. Somebody explain this to me. Basically, when you have like, you get to bowl. Here we go. Francesca knows bowling. You get to bowl with bumpers on, but you still can't get a fucking strike. So you go into the board and you change everyone else's scores. That's exactly what the right does in American democracy. I got some sports analogy correct. Anyway, I didn't mean to go on for too long about that because I have to bounce on a little bit, but there's so much more I wanted to talk about. I want to share this image. I think maybe some folks have seen it, and if you're listening as a podcast, this week was Flag Day in Israel, or like Israel Day, basically. And there's marches all over the world. There's a march in Manhattan, I believe. This was the march in Jerusalem. And every single Flag Day, we've seen this many, many years in a row in the West Bank, in Jerusalem and other places, is Israeli settlers will travel to usually to Jerusalem from their settlements in the West Bank, and they go there and they march, and they usually it usually comes with like a fuck ton of insane violence, really scary rhetoric, and a lot of bullying, violence, brutalizing of the local community, whether it's visitors to like the Al-Aqsa Mosque or whether it's Jerusalem, East Jerusalem residents. It's always marked by like, hey, we're just going to go fuck up some Palestinians. And this photo is so perfect. And I've got like a low res version of it, but it's so perfect. It looks like it's AI. And people have pointed that out. Like, oh, I'm studying every single hand on some of these boys because it looks like it can't be real. But it's basically a Palestinian, I believe Palestinian, but who knows? A Palestinian man with a press jacket on. I assume he is. He's wearing a press jacket. He's clearly there to cover Israel Day. And he is surrounded by West Bank settlers, young kids. We're looking like 14, 15, 16, 17. And they're all like kicking him, surrounding him, filming him. So this is from Evan Dyer, who writes, props to Israeli journalist Nir Hassan of Haaretz for bravely stepping up to defend a Palestinian colleague under attack by a mob of government supporters during the annual Flag Day March in Jerusalem. So this is the next photo when, again, the journalist that he references, Nir Hassan, basically, if you're listening, he's holding his colleague. He's just like pushing his colleague. So I guess this guy worked for Haaretz also, but he's identifiably Arab. So he's like embracing him to save him from this violent mob of like children. And granted, some of them have sticks. I'm not saying they're armed, but they are surrounding him and taunting him, jeering at him like he were like an animal. I mean, it's truly fucking frightening. But if you don't believe me on just this one image, I do think it's important to read very much not a, but the Times of Israel, who writes far-right violence, chance of death to Arabs at Jerusalem Day flag march in Old City. Extremist Jewish youths also chant, "May your village burn," en route through the Muslim quarter, while some assault journalists and Palestinian locals. 18 arrested. Extremists assaulted several journalists as well as Palestinian residents. Participants initially gathered out in front of the Jerusalem's Great Synagogue, waving flags, dancing, and singing religious nationalistic songs. Damascus is our gate. Damascus Gate is ours. The Temple Mount is ours. And God willing, complete victory is ours. One of them cried, flanked by a member of Likud. After the march's conclusion, at the Western Wall, Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, these again are people who are Smotrich. These are people who are threatening Netanyahu that if he doesn't continue the war, they're going to oust him. I mean, Netanyahu's basically done no matter what. The question is, how many more Palestinian lives, how much more blood is he going to have on his hands? And what's crazy about the blood that he has on his hands is that actually really sells in some far-right Israeli circles, as I'm explaining right here. For victory, we need to go to the north and fight Hezbollah and destroy them, Ben-Gvir called. We want victory. Go. No, let's see what happens. Go fight Hezbollah. We've done this before, people. You've done it before, and you lost before. But no, please go. Please drain more of the Israeli economy. My God, you're not already facing massive boycott, divestment, and sanction pressure more than you've ever felt in the entire existence of Israel. But no, go ahead. Go open another front of this bullshit war. As marchers passed through Damascus Gate, they began to chant, "May your village burn," a common anti-Arab refrain, and "Shuafat is up in flames," alluding to a Palestinian neighborhood in East Jerusalem. Young men plastered sticks on doors supporting the ideology of the late ultra-nationalist Rabbi Meir Kahan, founder of the racist Kahan Party, or Kach Party, which is considered a Jewish terror group and is outlawed in Israel. The Times of Israel witnessed several instances of vandalism. One sticker read, "Repentance plus war plus expulsion plus settlement equals victory," alluding to the dream of many right-wing Israelis to resettle the Gaza Strip. Blah, blah, blah. Palestinians want to wipe Israel off the map. "We know what's happening on October 7th. They killed our people. Don't tell me there are civilians in Gaza," he continued, adding that, quote, "Everyone in Gaza is connected to Hamas directly or indirectly." So there you go. Just openly. I think it's very fun that they're like, they want to exterminate us. By the way, victory equals full displacement and resettlement. Yay. Anyway, they're trying to get rid of us. Again, right-wing tactics. Every accusation is a confession. Every accusation is a confession, from the right in the United States to the right in Israel. And let's finish up this super fun Friday talking about the best stories, just the happiest, sweetest, most joyous, most Peter Navarro's vision boardy stories. Thank you, Andrew Torres, for that super chat. So this was a new article that came out in the New York Times, and it is absolutely terrifying. And it details the detainees that are being housed by Israel who've been captured since the genocide began. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, well, are they Hamas, militants? Are they combatants? Like, well, maybe this is good, at least they're like, there's gonna be some sort of due process, right? Wrong. These are not militants, and yet they are being subject to some incredibly heinous conditions. And I want to just explain a little bit about what's going on. There are 4,000 Gazan detainees as of May. An ambulance driver is one of them they spoke to, I believe, 8 people. His name is Mohammed Al-Kurdi. He's 38, an ambulance driver whom the military confirmed was held at this place, which is called Stetimen. I'm mispronouncing that. My colleagues didn't know if I was dead or alive. I was in prison for 32 days, said Mr. Al-Kurdi. He said he had been captured in November after his convoy of ambulances attempted to pass through an Israeli military checkpoint in the south of Gaza City. It felt like 32 years. So this is after the New York Times did a 3-month investigation. 8 former detainees, all of whom the military has confirmed were held at the site, who spoke on the record, variously said they'd been punched, kicked, beaten with batons, rifle butts, and handheld metal detectors while in custody. One said his ribs were broken after he was kneed in the chest, and a second detainee said his ribs broke after he was kicked and beaten with a rifle, an assault that a third detainee said he had witnessed. 7 said they had been forced to wear only a diaper while being interrogated. 3 said they had received electric shocks during their interrogations. Now that is in the 3rd or 4th paragraph of this New York Times article. It sounds bad. Doesn't sound particularly evil when it comes to the kinds of, let's say, the things that the United States did in the war on terror, the awful, heinous, atrocious, definitely illegal forms of torture that we engaged in. But just wait, buried in like paragraph 732 is some real harrowing shit. Notice what they didn't lead off with. But anyway, of course, senior military doctors said they never observed signs of torture, and commanders said they tried to treat detainees as humanly as possible. And yet, they confirmed that at least 12 soldiers had been dismissed from their roles at the site, some of them for excessive use of force. Okay, so no excessive use of force, but we're going to dismiss these people because of their excessive use of force. Okay, got it. This is pretty upsetting. Yoel Donchin, a military doctor serving at the site, said it was unclear why Israeli soldiers had captured many of the people he treated there, some of whom were highly unlikely to have been combatants involved in war. One was paraplegic. What are we doing, people? Another weighed roughly 300 pounds, and a third had breathed since childhood through a tube inserted into his neck. Do you know what these people are, guys? You know what that is? That's not cruelty. That's not, I mean, it is cruelty, but there's a reason why there are severely disabled people in detention. Why do you think? It's because they couldn't flee. These were people who could not leave their homes. If you're 300 pounds, if you're paraplegic, if you have to breathe through a tube in your neck, you might want to stay put. And so what happened? The almighty, super strong, incredible anti-terror fighting force, the most moral army in the world, the IDF, they come in and are like, oh, let's get this guy. This guy hasn't moved. Look at this person. Look at this 80-year-old woman. Let's detain her. They're fucking shooting fish in a barrel. They're detaining these people because it's easy. They're not detaining them because they're risks. They're not detaining them because they're scared of them. They're literally just doing this to just because they're fucking lazy and they're cowards. They're lazy cowards. How detainees are captured. And I apologize for all this. Fadi Bakr, a law student from Gaza City, said he was captured on January 5th by Israeli soldiers near his family home. Displaced by fighting earlier in the war, Mr. Bakr, 25, had returned to his neighborhood to search for flour, only to get caught in the middle of a firefight and wounded, he said. The Israelis found him bleeding after the fighting stopped. They stripped him naked, confiscated his phone and savings, beat him repeatedly, and accused him of being a militant who had survived battle. Several said they had been suspected of militant activity because soldiers had encountered them in areas the military thought were harboring Hamas fighters, including hospitals, UN schools, or depopulated neighborhoods like Mr. Bakr's. Like, all of the places. Later in the article, they say that actually one of the things the IDF says is that Hamas hides in ambulances. What a perfect way to blow up an ambulance. What a perfect way to ensure that the already wounded that you weren't able to kill the first time around, the people who survived your bombing, that they die. Because the goal here is death. The goal here is genocide. This is the goal. This is not, I hope the injured survive. We should roll out a bunch of programs. No. That's why there's starvation. That's why there's targeting of the weak. That's why there's a targeting of people who've already been injured and victims. That's why there's a targeting of babies. That's why there's a targeting of pregnant women in hospitals. That's why there's a targeting of shelters and places where families are. Because this is about, and they will tell you, future generations of Palestinians. This is why South Africa, and I believe now Ireland, are saying this is a genocide by international standards. Al-Kurdi, the ambulance driver, okay, this is what I just explained to y'all. Now, here's what's crazy. These guys are classified as unlawful combatants under Israel legislation. The detainees can be held for up to 75 days without judicial permission and 90 days without access to a lawyer, let alone a trial. 90 days. No charge. Some of these 8 people, they were just released. Now, there's some crazy ass shit. Okay, so where were they? They were in an open air hangar, a hangar with hundreds of others. They were required to sit handcuffed in silence on a mat for up to 18 hours a day. The hangar had no external wall, leaving it open to the rain and cold, and guards watched him from the other side of a mesh fence. Now, they couldn't move. So that's the other thing is like, if they move or if they talk, they get taken out and beaten. Exhausted after the journey, Mr. Becker fell asleep as soon as after his arrival, prompting an officer to summon him to a nearby command room. He said, the officer began beating him, Mr. Becker said. This is the punishment for anyone who sleeps, he recalled the officer saying. 2 Israelis who were at a hospital last year said, okay, so this is really fucking psychotic. So a lot of them who were captured are injured, like they were saying. A couple of Israelis who were at this hospital that some of the detainees are taken to, one of them spoke on condition of anonymity to avoid prosecution and said that at the time the patients were not given enough painkillers during painful procedures. Once again, we're not talking about Gazan hospitals. We're talking about Israeli facilities. We're talking about inside Israel. That's where these folks are being held. They have access to all kinds of painkillers, all kinds of meds, anesthesia, whatnot, if they need any kind of serious surgery. They're not being administered it. Physicians for Human Rights, a rights group in Israel, said in a report in April that the field hospital was, quote, a low point for medical ethics and professionalism. Yeah, you think? It's a little bit of a low point. Now, this is fucking crazy. So, you know that Israel is committing war crimes. You know that they're afraid of being held accountable for those war crimes because of the following little details. Doctors serving at the detention camp, Steve Bannon, who spoke to the Times, said they were also told not to write their names on any official documentation and not to address each other by name in front of the patients. Dr. Donshin said that officials feared they could be identified and charged with war crimes at the ICC. Don't call me, but this, you guys, if you are uncomfortable with making comparisons to Nazi Germany, shake that shit off. Actually, to be honest with you, I think Nazi Germany, I don't think Nazis actually gave a shit about whether or not they were outed because they were proud to do it. They were open about it. They were also there was nobody who was going to hold them accountable, right? Also, they knew that the people that they were treating, so to speak, were ultimately going to be killed. So, but you can imagine, I mean, this is just, it. Anyway, I'm like, maybe the Nazis had a little bit more, they were obviously, ironically, the entire international framework of human rights law was set up because of what happened in the Holocaust. But here you have them being ordered not to refer to each other by name just in case one of their victims or one of the people who was detained remembers their name and can identify them later on or open up a legal case against them. Now this is like always when you hear torture stories, this one is always the one that like drives me nuts because I'm someone who I get one song stuck in my head and that for me is torture, and that's the most torture I've ever encountered, thank God. But we've heard of like sensory deprivation, right? And like the use of loud music to break your detainee down. Mr. Bacher said he was called in for interrogation 4 days after his arrival. Like others who spoke to the Times, he remembered being brought into a separate enclosure that the detainees called the disco room because they said they were forced to listen to extremely loud music that prevented them from sleeping. Mr. Bacher considered it a form of torture, saying it was so painful that blood began to trickle from inside his ear. I didn't even know that could happen. Like, I've seen that in movies. Now, how long are we into this article? What did we say? We're like 2/3 of the way through? I'd say we're 2/3 of the way through. Let's see what some of the details that the Times decides to hide all the way down, way, way, way below the fold. Mr. Hamlawi, a senior nurse, said a female officer had ordered 2 soldiers to lift him up and press his rectum against a metal stick that was fixed to the ground. Mr. Hamlawi said the stick penetrated his rectum for roughly 5 seconds, causing it to bleed and leaving him with unbearable pain. Who's using sexual violence as a weapon of war, motherfuckers? Is it Hamas on the one day, in the very few short hours they had? Or is it the government running a massive detention center, forcing detainees to sit on metal rods? You don't think that's a fucking form of sexual torture? UNRWA has a leaked draft of a report detailing a similar account. It cited a 41-year-old detainee who said that interrogators, quote, made me sit on something like a hot metal stick and it felt like fire. And also said that another detainee died after they put the electric stick up his anus. Mr. Al-Hamlawi recalled being forced to sit in a chair wired with electricity. He said he was shocked so often that after initially urinating uncontrollably, he then stopped urinating for several days. Mr. Al-Hamlawi said he too had been forced to wear nothing but a diaper to stop him from soiling the floor. Mr. Bacher, remember the ambulance driver? Oh no, the guy who went looking for flour, also said he was forced to sit in a chair wired with electricity, sending a current pulsing through his body that made him pass out. Now here's the best part. Mr. Bacher is released. One morning, early February. He said what, about a month? He asked for his phone back and the 7,200 shekels, roughly $2,000, that had been confiscated from him during his arrest. In response, a soldier hit and shouted at him, Mr. Bacher said. No one should ask about his phone or his money. So these fucks are not only torturing regular, random, disabled people, they're stealing their money. They're stealing their money. $2,000, their cell phones. Like, again, in the United States, you get your stuffs back. You get your personal belongings back. Once you are released, you get to keep the things that you came in with. Not to belabor the Nazi point, but it does remind you in the film Zone of Interest, you know, there's a moment where we've seen in lots of Holocaust films, which is the Nazis and family members of Nazis will appropriate and steal the clothing, the jewelry, the items, the belongings of the Jews, right? And then they would sell them or they would get them for free. I mean, these fucks. You need $2,000 off of some poor guy who was searching for flour in the rubble of his bombed out home. Like, keep telling yourselves that they're the good guys. Keep gaslighting us that they're the good guys. These are not fringe reports. This is the New York Times now. That's the Times of Israel. This is the UN. None of this is fringe. I'm just so amazed people continue to lie to themselves day after fucking day. Jerry McLean, Gal Gadot had a female friend raped by an IDF soldier and accused her of making it up. Why does that feel so right? Why does that sound so right to me? I mean, look, those who live in glass houses, we have massive amounts of rape and sexual assault rampant in our US military. But that is what I believe a culture of militarism breeds, right? If you are taught to dehumanize the enemy in this case, and then, treat your fellow soldier with the utmost respect, no, it's usually women. It's usually people of color. It's usually any gay folks who serve in the military who are going to be 9 times out of 10 victimized, because it is an ideology of violence. It's an ideology of violence, man. I'm sorry. Call me a pacifist. I am, I am. I mean, look, if and when we need to do the rev, we will do the rev with, the tools that we have. But I prefer nonviolent action 100%. God, that feels like that's so funny. Of course, Gal Gadot was like, "You're lying." Cassandra Capranica, what's up, girl? Says Kate Bush said it best decades ago. They are racing the race that claims the place. Kate Bush said that? Fuck. Talking Back Eden, thank you so much for that super chat. Please keep speaking for those that can't. Much love. I mean, look, it's so funny because it's not funny. We often go through these stories and sometimes they're heavier than others. And sometimes it's more about children. And we could talk about the UN school bombing this week, but that detailed report of the detainees, like Hamas doesn't have massive prisons with tons of Israelis who've been taken hostage, taken prisoner. No, they have a few hostages. They have like a few hundred hostages if they're still alive. And not by the doing of Hamas, but by the doing of Israel for, systemic starvation, bombing, to say nothing of the hostages that did manage to escape and then were killed by the IDF itself. I mean, these poor family members, like, it is very radicalizing, but the Israelis who have family who are hostages, like, you can only imagine what they are going through. They are being told that their family members truly are just, they need to take one for the team. Yeah, they're alive. They might be alive. We don't really know. But they're going to have to die so we can continue recolonizing and bombing Gaza back to the Stone Age. Sorry. They died for a good cause, right? I mean, it's just wild. Hey, Omega Star, thank you so much for becoming a member over on YouTube. And you can too support this show. My favorite way is Patreon, patreon.com/situationroom. This is a tiny labor of love if it wasn't obvious to everybody listening or watching. There's only a handful of wonderful people who work with me. And, it is a shoestring operation. And so I'm like, I don't mean to sound weird, but I am so grateful to you all. Like, I truly am grateful for supporting the show, for getting excited about the guests we have on, for sending me ideas for who to bring on and stories. And again, with Patreon, we got a whole little chat going for people sending in awesome stories, things from their own communities. So I love that. And I'm trying to book all the guests that I can. Tuesday, Olayemi Olurin is going to be back on the show. The woman who absolutely cooked Mayor Adams to his face. She's joining me, so I cannot wait for that. And just a little shout out to the Twitch folks. Late Bloomer, thanks so much. Said, I took your comment to heart about all the subs for the damage report, and I feel that you deserve the same amount of support from us. Thank you, Late Bloomer. You're very, very kind. And thank you so much, Rosalba, for those cheers. Obviously, Late Bloomer and Stranic76. Yay, Franny Fio. Google search images of Marjorie Titan Green close resemble to the Smiling Titan from Attack on Titan. I am definitely going to Google that now. Late Bloomer also celebrating 35 months. Holy shit. Spending almost 3 years of laughs, love, and compassion with you and the Frantifa. Much love. You know, the Frantifa is all about compassion, baby. That's what we love. And Charm Chaos, just another shout out to you. Thanks y'all so much. I will see you on Tuesday. You have a great fucking weekend. Later.